My name is Hjalmar. I'm the founder and CEO of Grid, and I'm joined here today by Ben Collins, one of the leading voices on Google Sheets and one of the leading educators on Google Sheets in the world. And we're going to have a quick conversation about AI and spreadsheets and where they are and where they're heading. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much, Hjalmar, and thank you for the invite today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think there's a lot to talk about, so yeah, I'm excited.
Me too. So I'm gonna bring up a few slides just to kind of guide the conversation. So bear with me here. There we go. Everybody should be seeing my slides now. Yeah. So the title here: AI and spreadsheets: today's capabilities and tomorrow's possibilities. Like I said, myself, founder and CEO of Grid, a spreadsheet technology company, joined by Ben Collins. Many of you will know him already. A few housekeeping notes before we get into the conversation. So we will have about 30-minute conversation between the two of us. There are definitely a lot of different topics to cover, and I'm sure we won't cover them all. But then please put your questions into the Q&A. We have some folks on the call with us that will help us kind of go through these and make sure that they get covered at the end, and then use the chat to interact with each other and for everything else. So we'll probably leave so 25-30 minutes of conversation, and then another 10-15 for the Q&A at the end. So let's just dive into it. When it comes to spreadsheets and AI, it makes sense to first look at what the incumbents are doing. There are essentially just two spreadsheet solutions to speak of in the world, Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets. And I think we have a fairly split audience here today. So let's just take a look at it. If I start on the Excel side, I think I have, not only tried most of the things that they have baked into the product already, but also read quite a lot of Microsoft research and so on. And one of the things that surprised me, in some ways, I'm surprised how little has yet been done, at least how little has yet been deployed into production on Excel. And I think we could fairly say that what AI can do, or what Copilot can do in Excel, is limited to two things. First of all, you have the Copilot sidebar where you can have a conversation with an LLM focused on the Microsoft environment and Excel in particular, and that can help you with writing formulas and so on. But it's not that different from just having an LLM environment open in a browser and having a conversation there, because you still have to copy paste things in between the sidebar and into the spreadsheet if you are writing formulas and so on. The other thing, and where kind of things are more integrated, are things it can do with tables. So most of the impactful things that you see in Excel when it comes to AI has to do with tables and has to do with aggregations and charts you can do on top of those. And I think this is a topic we'll cover in a little more detail, because I feel there is kind of a distinction that I have made for a long time between types of spreadsheets, where on the one hand, you have tabular spreadsheets that may not even have formulas in them, but are data storage and allow you to analyze data. Is clearly one type of spreadsheet, and that's what we have in this screenshot, for example. Then you have the spreadsheet models, where things aren't nearly as structured, but also kind of play on some of the core strengths of the spreadsheet, with the formulas and the complicated calculations and kind of the domain of business and finance. And this is actually jives very well with what Excel says, or Microsoft says on the Excel website. When it says get started with Copilot in Excel, if you kind of read through that sentence there, it helps you do more with your data by generating formula column suggestions. So that is on tabular data, showing insights in charts and pivot tables. And again, these charts and pivot tables pivot tables obviously on top of tabular data, but the charts too, and highlighting interesting data. And that's actually something that works not only in tabular data, but also formatting more widely in the spreadsheet. But this is a fairly limited set of all the things you can do in spreadsheets. So maybe over to you, Ben, to kind of talk a little bit through what you've seen in the Google Sheets world.
Sure. So I think there's been a lot of development this year, especially with Google Sheets and with AI. And I made a little list before we came on air here. And I think there are sort of 6 ways you can interact with AI and Sheets, depending on where you draw the boundaries. The first you mentioned was just essentially using a standalone LLM to just chat with it and then copy paste. But we'll put that one to one side now and talk more about the actual spreadsheet native ones. They have things like generating these table templates now. So that would be the second thing I mentioned. You can go straight to, rather than just having the blank sheet, you can say, I need an HR summary template and press a button and sort of get started. But again, they're pretty limited. I don't do much with them myself. So that's one. The autofill has been given an AI boost now, and maybe Microsoft has this as well, but it's a lot smarter than it was, or a lot more effective than it was a couple of years ago at sort of picking up some more of the sentiment, for example, from a column, and then being able to apply, say, a star rating system was an example that's a little bit more advanced than just a sequence of numbers, say. But again, limited in application. Then, of course, the big one is the Gemini sidebar, which is what you're showing on the screen now. And that's really developed a lot over the last 6 months, especially. And it can summarize data, analyze data, it can create pivot tables, create charts, and those charts are fully editable charts now, and it can create pretty complex formulas. It surprises me actually about how well it does now with those more advanced formulas. And then, let's get into that in a moment, but I'll just summarize the other AI options you have. There's the AI formula now that's come out this year, where you can type equals AI, give it a prompt, reference some cells maybe if that's relevant. And that does pretty well at sort of, again, summarizing text data or generating or doing sentiment analysis. So saying whether customer reviews are positive or negative. I did an example recently where it generated draft emails based on rows of data. So things like that. It's really useful at sort of translating numbers into text for you. That would be another sort of way you could work with that formula. And then the final way is there are plenty of add-ons that you can, third-party add-ons that bring AI into your sheet as well. And obviously that's the same for Microsoft Excel. But we'll put those to one side again for the moment. And maybe we can just talk about Gemini for a little bit longer. So I think, and we're going to talk about this as well in more detail shortly, but Gemini does really well with these flat data tables that you've mentioned, where the data's in nice columns. The columns have data types assigned to them, so it's a number column or it's a date column or a currency column and things like that. And when Gemini does not do very well is when you have it set up more in sort of a messy, complex model where there's several different tables that are linked by formulas, and then Gemini tends to just get latched onto one of those tables, focus on that, and it doesn't have the full picture. It doesn't bring in the data that's hidden in the logic of the formulas and things. But it does very well when you have this one single data set and you say summarize that data. It will give you a very detailed summary now. It will create these charts for you. It will give you all sorts of insights, and it does that. It does that pretty well. And like I said, it does formulas really well. It still, though, is it's still basic, really, though, because you can't. It will generate pivot tables for you, but it can't then go and edit them if you want to say, can you sort them from highest to lowest, or can you add a different category in there? It gets stuck and says, I can't do that yet. You need to go and modify it yourself. So still has, a lot of limitations. And the other issue I think that we still have with AI, and this is Gemini, Copilot, Claude, any of them, is just knowing whether the results it's giving you are true or not, whether it's hallucinated, made something up. And I've seen examples where Gemini creates this beautiful stacked bar chart, but it's it's stacking things that were really not meant to be stacked on top of each other and giving you a false impression of things. So, but that's not Gemini specific. That's across all the AI models. That's an issue that's still a big challenge. So, yeah, let me pause there, though,
Yeah.
Hjalmar, and hand it
No,
back to you.
that's a great overview, and I think maybe there are a couple of things that that stand out when you kind of talk through this, because there are so many aspects to the intersection between spreadsheets and AI. One is bringing AI insights into the data, the actual data in the spreadsheet, like the enrichment thing, whether that's sentiment analysis or some other formulas or opt-ins that you can use to populate a column or populate the spreadsheet in other ways by reaching out to AI for something new, and that's definitely opening up a lot of possibilities. But then the other aspect is, how does AI help us working with the spreadsheet, doing the charts, doing the analysis of the data, and so on, regardless of whether that data came from AI or somewhere else. And then maybe kind of the third aspect, and that's kind of where we have been focused at Grid, is then allowing you to tap into the insights that have been baked into spreadsheets from elsewhere, just like you tap into your the contents of your text files, across the entire organization. Why not tap into the data and knowledge and business logic that's stored in your spreadsheets? And kind of that goes more to what does this mean for kind of the workplace in general. But I think kind of what we are, in some ways, what we have decided to focus on here is how is AI helping us build spreadsheets? How is it baked into the spreadsheet software, and what is it doing there? And I think we have a fairly good overview here of what these tools are at least yet doing natively, which largely kind of comes down to working with tabular data in various ways, and then helping write formulas, which it's definitely really good at writing individual formulas. But as soon as you have a chain of formulas, you have a waterfall or something, some other kind of a little bit more complex, it's not really helping that much with that. And again, kind of the main page for working with Gemini and Google Sheets will list out these things that we've talked about: creating tables, formulas, generating data analysis and insights, build charts and graphs. They don't mention that this is still, almost all of this is limited to tabular data, summarize files from across drives, and perform formatting and other things like that. Now, if we look a little bit further, if we look outside what is happening with Excel and Google Sheets, because often the innovation comes from smaller players that are experimenting with things that may or may not work out, and they have much more freedom. They don't have to think about this large user base that that will be affected of everything they put in there. I put on here just a selection of fairly random, but I think still representative products, and they clearly fall into two categories. There are add-ins that are trying to do something new inside of Excel and Google or Google Sheets. FormulaBot was very early to the game. I think they were out like I don't remember, maybe at least early 24. So very soon after ChatGPT, FormulaBot already had like at least an Excel add-in, mainly helping with writing formulas inside of Excel. But then you have things like Carousel that is a big product aimed at helping with financial modeling inside of Excel. I haven't had a lot of hands-on experience with it myself, but it's a really ambitious add-in that allows you to do a lot of things inside of inside of the traditional spreadsheet software. And then on the other hand, you have the challenger spreadsheets, people or organizations that are writing new spreadsheet software, essentially presenting themselves as alternatives to Excel and Google Sheets, like source table and rows and subset. And there are a few others on that side, where they are they're taking the familiar spreadsheet paradigm and they are rethinking them to some extent, based on the AI first, or based on kind of how you would think about context. From you, Ben, have you seen anything interesting here? Kind of where is your mind on all of these things?
Yeah, I think one thing to just mention is that Excel has over 1 billion users. I think Google Sheets has something like 800 million users now. So it's a gigantic market. And within that, spreadsheets are being used for a million different things. So I think there's a lot of room for niche players to come in and say, hey, we can own this little space here and make people's lives easier by applying AI to it. And I've seen that there's spreadsheet AI challenges out there that, for example, are focused on generating dashboards very, very quickly for you. So you take your tabular data, you can click a button and it generates, a page with all the charts in laid out, and you can drag and drop them and move them and things like that. And it's way quicker than you might build a dashboard in Google Sheets the traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that at least in where we are now and in the next couple of years, there's a lot of room for innovation in this space. And I think, I think always though the problem is that you go back to the first slide you showed of the incumbents. They have this,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's familiar with Excel and Sheets. They have a level of trust. A lot of organizations just, they're sort of, workspace customers or Microsoft Office customers, and therefore you're required to use that software and things. So I think it's just regardless of whether it's AI or not, it's a very hard market to break into in some ways. But it's so gigantic, you don't need to sort of convert many users to your product to make a something meaningful. And then with the add-ons in Google Sheets, mostly I've seen them in the generating the AI formula helpers, and I think that Gemini is getting very good at doing that itself now. So I'm thinking it's making it a little bit harder perhaps for those companies to rely solely on being a formula generator, because that's natively becoming very good now. But then again, there's other ones that maybe help with charts and things. But again, that sort of stuff is getting baked into Gemini pretty well. So what the challenges offer is a totally different, they can build from the ground up and, for example, get rid of some of the spreadsheet UX that we've just lived with for years and assumed is always the way we should do it. And they can say, well, hang on, what if we built a voice first spreadsheet? I don't think we have that yet, but that might be something, where a challenger comes along and totally changes the game. Maybe it's not as convenient for doing traditional spreadsheet stuff, but if you start with that approach and, the efficiency of moving forward with that, maybe it's worth it for a lot of users. So I think there's a lot of room on the right for innovation, or on the challenges side there. And then I think the add-ons and add-ins, I don't know, I think they're competing with Gemini, and Gemini is moving very fast to sort of eat lunch a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. For example, Rose, I've followed them since they started, which is a while ago now, and I'm a big fan. I think they've really found their footing in making quick charting, quick and beautiful charting on top of tabular data really easy now using AI. And just recently they moved that into mobile, which is something that it's not easy to work with data in mobile on mobile in general, but they seem to have done that quite well. So it's kind of it's not trying to be the everything that Excel can do, or Google Sheet can do. It's taking kind of a subset and really kind of doing a part of what spreadsheets do a lot better. Source tables may be more focused on the modeling side, but they often have some innovation in terms of the UI and so on, in addition to the AI capabilities. Moving along a little bit, like I think one thing that stands out is this distinction between the models and the tabular data. It's something that I have thought a lot about, and I think it's kind of worth calling out. These are, we all know them. Every spreadsheet user knows these two types of spreadsheets as soon as they are described to them. We don't necessarily tend to think of them in these separate ways, but the spreadsheet models, they are something you find in finance, planning, and various calculations. They will be simplified by formulas and by free form references in the formulas. Often there are some assumptions or inputs that drive some formulas in them. There will be calculation chains in them rather than just kind of row level calculations in the tabular data. They will have this kind of free form layout. It doesn't mean that it's totally unstructured, but you'll often find these islands of data. Maybe in a typical financial spreadsheet, you will have month by month numbers laid out column by column, but then departments or cost items or something laid out vertically. So there is structure to it, but there's not an easily readable, not an easily computer readable structure to the underlying data. And these are encoding some business logic. So that's kind of one type of spreadsheet. The other type of spreadsheet is, could often just as well be a CSV file, meaning it's just static data. It's in columnar format. In the top row, you typically find this a column header that describes what that column is about. And then there are some records below that, whether they are logs or transactions or employees or something like that below it, that lend themselves really well to aggregation and kind of more BI-like things. And here, just kind of to give everyone an example, here are very typical examples of each of these. Again, you can see on the spreadsheet side, this isn't unstructured, but it's not rigidly structured either. Whereas on the tabular data side, you have this columnar data that it's very very rigid. Now, I will say they sometimes have formulas, but the formulas are always row-based. They will not refer to another row. They will just refer to something in that row typically. And I think this really stands out when you think kind of start to dig into the AI capabilities, because so much of the AI capabilities seem to be on the tabular data side.
I agree. I think that's where the line is drawn at the moment a little bit. And I've seen that myself with working with the AI tools with Gemini, the sidebar with a tabular data set. It's pretty effective, like I said, at doing the data analysis and summarizing that for you. But if you give it a model where you have, the example I used was a membership model to sort of see how I could grow a membership. So it had assumptions like how many members you might add a month, what the churn rate is, how many members leave each month, what the cost of the membership to start with, does it increase each year? So there's a whole bunch of sort of input parameters that sit over to the right-hand side of the spreadsheet. The formulas all refer to those assumptions and those parameters. And then you can tweak them very easily and it will change your model, and you can, the output sort of annual revenue and things change. And right now, if you try and do anything with that with Gemini, it just comes back to you and says, I can't modify values in your spreadsheet at the moment. And this comes back to the same reason it can't, it can generate a very simple pivot table for you, but then if you ask it to modify the pivot table and more complex, it can't do that. So it won't actually, act on behalf of you in your spreadsheet yet. And I don't, I see that I think we're still some way from that, actually. I think, I don't see us doing that anytime, in the next weeks or months sort of timeframe. That might be a year or two away or whatever. But the tabular data, it's getting better and better and better at working with that tabular data, because it, as you said, it's a CSV file. It's just one flat 2D grid of data. It can ingest it all, and it's not looking for elsewhere for other bits of information that as a human we can, easily, or not easily, but we can understand and bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of on that front, maybe the BI-like workflows, again, when you're summarizing or aggregating data that is nicely structured, they are much more attainable, it seems, to AI than the financial modeling and so on. So, I don't know what that means for the future of these products, but I sometimes, the more I kind of think about this division between different types of spreadsheets and looking at, for example, the innovation in Google Sheets over the last year or two, a lot of it seems to be focused on the right-hand side here on the tabular data. So I wonder if there might even be room, or if we might see these products kind of split up at some point, where you have the modeling spreadsheet and kind of more capabilities there, maybe more aimed at business modeling and finance, and then you have tabular data things. Maybe Airtable obviously has tried to kind of do something very different in that space and been somewhat successful. But there's just, it seems like there's quite a lot of cost creeping in trying to serve both of these use cases well in the same product.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And I think certainly um, they are quite distinct use cases that almost have different sets of users in some cases as well, which again lends them to being could be two separate products. And I see, especially with the tabular data, that not this isn't an AI specific thing, but what we are seeing is that people want that the number of rows in Google Sheets to increase. I've got bigger data, bigger data, bigger data, and moving to something like BigQuery is quite a technical step up.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've got a team or engineers that can do that, that's great. If you haven't, and but you have gigantic spreadsheets, that gets quite tricky. And I think that, and that's sort of where Airtable sits. They're a database, but they're also sort of user friendly like a spreadsheet. So there's that sort of product there that I think is solving that problem. And then, as you said, your team's working very hard on the spreadsheet
Mm-hmm.
model side of things and solving that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And now that you pointed out, that's actually one distinction, one other distinction. A tabular data set will often have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. You may even want to work with millions of rows. Whereas I don't think I've ever seen a spreadsheet model that extends below row 1000 in a spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet models are created by humans. They may tap into tabular data that comes from another system, but they're built by humans from probably starting from a blank sheet to begin with. But so time flies. This is obviously the most juicy thing is to think about the
Yeah.
future. Like what will spreadsheets look like in the future? What will we expect from our spreadsheet software and spreadsheets in an AI first era? Thoughts?
You heard it here first. So I think of it as three buckets I'm going to give you, which is short term, which is what's the next year, medium term, which is say 3-ish years, 3 to 5 years perhaps, and then longer term, which is the sort of 5 to 10 year range. And I think the next year we'll see a lot of development of these current AI features as they exist, just to help us work with spreadsheets the way we work with them already, but just a little bit more quickly, doing, offloading some of the sort of formula building and all that sort of stuff over to the AI tools a little bit more, but essentially just developing what we've already seen today and just building on that. And I think we'll see a lot of competition between Excel and Sheets. And then if anybody like, Rows or Bricks or these other ones comes along and does something super cool, we'll probably see it eventually hit Sheets and Excel as well. And I think we'll also see a lot of users and businesses adopt all of these tools over the next 6 months to the year. I think many people are not really using anything AI with AI yet in their spreadsheets. I think for the majority of those billion plus users are just still using spreadsheets the way we always have. So I think we'll see more adoption as well in the next year for sure. In the medium term, then I think we will see a shift towards using and operating spreadsheets differently, where instead of clicking up to a menu and saying insert the pivot table or whatever, or typing equals into a cell, we'll be using more of the going through the AI. So we'll say build me a pivot table that shows this and this, and we're sort of seeing that in limited capacity already, but I think we'll see that becoming a lot more the norm. So essentially having more just conversations with our spreadsheets, and that even could be through voice as well, not just through typing. I think we'll get to that point where you have the spreadsheet, it has my membership model, and I can just talk and say things like, what will the revenue look like if I change this, this, and this. Essentially, it's sort of the spreadsheet becomes like your data analysis assistant doing that for you. And I think as well, perhaps the other thing we'll see is maybe more capabilities on the modeling side. I think that's it takes longer. That's more complex. It's taking longer. But we'll see that coming. Then in the 5 to 10 year range, I think spreadsheets will look quite different, because right now they're built for humans to use them and to work with them. So we have all the menus, we have buttons we click, and I think that we're not. I've worked with or built some just experiments with, say, the OpenAI's operator agent, and taught it to go and build me a pivot table by clicking on the same menus that I do. And that's kind of a ridiculous way for AI to work with the spreadsheets. They'll have spreadsheets that essentially strip away some of the typical UX we have, because we just won't be using it anymore. And instead we'll just be, like I said, talking to our spreadsheets with the voices, and they'll be just doing a lot of the building and the formulas. And we'll get to a point perhaps where we never write formulas again. We'll just say, describe what we want to do, and off it goes. We're seeing that quite a bit with coding, for example, where, I haven't just sat down with a blank script file and just started from scratch writing a program now. I say, okay, Gemini, I want to build a sidebar add-on that will reference multiple sheets, do this, do that. And then we go back and forth for half an hour, and then the code is really good. I'll copy that in, and then maybe I still make changes myself. I'll jump into the code and spot on line 17, I want it to work with a different range than the range it's got there, or I want to change that to something else. And so I think we'll get to that point with spreadsheets a little bit, where a lot of the building can then be done when we describe what we want. Sort of build me this membership model where these are the assumptions, start with the month of June and run it through for the next 3 years. Give me a summary output table with annual revenues, and then it spits all of that out for you. And then you can say, okay, change, I need 3 extra columns to show this, this, and this. And I think we'll get to that point where we can have very much more of a conversational approach, and that's sort of where I see it going. And then one other thing I think that we'll just see, I think we're seeing this already, but I think we'll see more closer integrations between, I think the line between the spreadsheet and the database will almost sort of blur a little bit, where any business user will be able to tap into those billion plus silos of data without needing a data engineer to build the pipeline for them. It will be a sort of a quick 1 or 2 clicks, and you're into the database to look at your data. I think that will sort of blur a little bit as well.
Won't that be a dream for the business user and a headache for the IT department?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I come from the business user side of things, from the
right. No, exactly. And
I think there's probably IT people shaking their heads and saying, no, that'll be a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. But it all comes, I mean, on that side, it comes down to what people have been trying to do for a long time, to have proper data catalogs and kind of have all of this data readily available. And maybe kind of, that has nothing to do with AI. It has just has to do with data management and kind of data engineering. And that's just as important as it ever has, kind of to enabling these things. But if we kind of stick to the spreadsheet as we tend to use it, which is like on isolated, islands of data, I wonder here, one way I've kind of thought about the question that we have here in front of us: what will spreadsheets look like in an AI first era? I have a 13-year-old, so he is very much kind of growing up, with AI as something that is just a part of regular life. Like, that's not innovation to him; it's just a part of life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that when he gets his first business idea, he will not decide that he will sit down and learn how to write formulas in Excel. He will go to an assistant, whatever the interface there is, whether it's voice or text or whatever, and say, I have this business idea. Can you help me build a business model? And he will expect that to work. Like, he will expect the outcome of that, maybe through through multiple iterations, to be a working business model. So I wonder if this is in the end of the day, like looking maybe 5 to 10 years or 20 years down the line, whether we are seeing the first real threat to the decades of dominance of spreadsheets as the main way to work with these types of or do this type of work.
That's a great question that I think is a very difficult one really know. I don't know. I think let me speak personally first. Is that I am a visual person, and I like to, even though a spreadsheet might have thousands or tens of thousands of rows of data, hundreds of columns, I still like to see it in front of me visually, and just even if I just eyeball a little bit of it, and I sort of feel like that gives me a real sense of what's in that data set and what I might look for and do and things. And I think that's one thing I find working with databases when I'm in a SQL editor harder than working with spreadsheets. I don't have that visual reference of, because I think then that sparks a bit of creativity of, okay, maybe I want to combine this column and that column to see how they, if they're related in some way. So I think that even when we are moving to a different way of, where it's AI does a lot of the building and the heavy lifting for us, I still think we'll have a visual component of that looks and feels like a traditional spreadsheet for some time yet. And I think also that, but the other point I wanted to make that plays into that a little bit is I think, we know that hallucinations are a problem with AI, and we know that they struggle with calculations as well, especially in certain numeric things and whatnot, because they're statistical models, so they're not declarative calculations. They work on statistical outputs and things. So there's some hallucinations and mistakes there, and I think that if we're trusting spreadsheets, or the spreadsheet of the future, to do the analysis and do a lot of the work for us, we still need to have some verification framework and process and whatnot somewhere along that way. So the way that coders can build in what they call unit tests, which is where they'll say take a block of code and they'll isolate little bits of the code and say, okay, if I have input A, I expect output B, and things like that. And they can run some tests and it will ensure that the code is behaving how they expect. And so I think we'll need to see some innovation in that side of things to go alongside the AI. And I don't think really we're seeing that yet. But I think part of that might be we want to see some visual cues still of sort of like, this is the data, this is what the model looks like, or what the spreadsheet engine has done, and it's showing us some sort of, what those outputs look like. So I think we'll still see, it will still look like a spreadsheet, even if the menus have all disappeared, or we have just a microphone button at the bottom that we just click and that's how we do things. I think also there's still going to be use cases that are so complex for a long time where we need to get in there, and there's only so many times you can describe a problem in a bunch of different ways until you say, look, I know exactly what I need to do in my head, and it's taking me longer to try and prompt this than it would be if I could just get in there and hands-on change that. So I think certainly for a while yet, we'll still be able to go in there and do everything we want ourselves. And again, I think as well, it really comes down to the user and the use case. If you're let's say a casual spreadsheet user, I think AI is going to be fantastic because you can just describe what you want, it will build it, and you'll move. You can get very quickly, or it will analyze your data very quickly. You can get your answers and results very quickly and move on. I think when you're building sort of, very, very complex sheets across multiple sheets, and it's a critical output for your business, then you're going to want, humans very much still involved in that loop there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe we kind of move to some of the audience question here. So we give it a few more minutes here. So it's one about predictive analysis. Have we seen any AI or spreadsheet applications that work on predictive statistics? Is this something that you have seen?
So I think the tool maybe that I've seen closest to that is one called Julius AI.
Yep.
And it's like a data analysis tool built on top of, well, I think you can choose whichever model you like actually as the underlying model. But it's very, very heavily focused on data analysis and statistics. So I think that's the only thing I've seen that sort of would perhaps answer that question. That's Julius AI. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'll say there is, there are ways to do predictive analysis, and BI tools, and data science tools do predictive analytics quite well. But one of the differences between predictive analytics and what people model in their spreadsheets is that predictive analytics will tell you what will happen if things keep going the way they are, or how they're trending, and what will happen if that trend, it may be a cyclical trend, it may be a very complicated trend. But if you are thinking about what will happen if we open a new branch office, or what will happen if we spend more on advertising, or what will happen if we introduce a new product or change our pricing, those aren't things that predictive analytics answer. Those are questions that you reason through by creating a spreadsheet model and coding kind of your knowledge of the business and your best assumptions of the business, and then changing those inputs. So it's not, many of the more difficult questions are answered by modeling things by hand, rather than kind of leaving it to a statistical model to figure out what's going on in the historical data. Couple of more things here. So there was one question specifically to you here about Gemini and app script that Gemini used to be able to provide things, and you did a webinar on AppScript in Gemini, and now it seems like that has maybe gone away. Is that?
So AppScript right now, you can't open Gemini in the AppScript editor, and that's never been available. I hope we do get it someday, because I think that'd be fantastic. But right now, you would go to the standalone gemini.google.com app, the chats, and then that's very, very good at generating AppScript. So yeah, you can still definitely use Gemini to create AppScript. I don't think you can do it through the sidebar. Maybe that's what this Robert was mentioning, but yeah, you can still for sure use Gemini itself to do AppScript, and even on the free tier, it's very good at generating. I don't think I've seen doing it in the sidebar before, but yeah.
I would say most of these models are incredibly good at these. When it's just seen enough examples of the code in AppScript would definitely be one of those, and it's incredibly good at most of them. But it kind of goes back to the workflow. I think copy paste is probably used 10 times more in the age of AI than it was before, because you're always copy pasting things between your systems and AI and back again. So some of those integrations will probably be tighter in the future. Maybe take one more. We're running out of time, but maybe one more question before we call it a day here. So I can see like a little bit of a theme in a couple of the questions here. It's all about kind of the, is the AI going to take over? Is the human in the loop, like the interplay between the user? Whether let's dig into the theme of, like, will AI make spreadsheets more accessible to non-technical users? So will more people be able to build and use spreadsheets now that we have AI? Or will it mainly help the same audience as has been working with spreadsheets forever?
I think it will do both, actually. I think there are tools. We talked about rows and bricks is another one. There's some tools out there, new spreadsheets that are coming along and saying, hey, let's assume they have no prior knowledge of spreadsheets. They do not want to learn formulas. That's all too complex. And these folks know how to type a prompt and know how to build. And there's spreadsheet applications now where you can sort of take this AI first approach, and so that will help people, I think, that are not technical and don't particularly want to become technical or learn spreadsheets. And then for the existing audience, I think that it really comes down to whether the individual has a willingness to learn these new tools and frameworks and things, and let go of some of the baggage they've spent years building. And then also, and then if they do that, then it really, they can get a lot of value from these tools. And I think you can really sort of, you're not abandoning what you've learned. You're just saying, how can these new tools enhance the way I work already? And it might be letting go of certain things. I think when you spent decades becoming extremely proficient writing formulas, it's going to be hard to let go of that completely. But I think we'll get to that point eventually where it's just so much quicker to generate a formula. And so an example would be, say, regular expression formulas. Very difficult to write, very time consuming. You often have to reference and look things up, but the AI tools do that very quickly and very well. So that would be an example right now where maybe, even if you know regex very well, you'd probably turn to the AI tool first.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so I think, like, if we sum things up here, a few things that stand out to me. Think that, I think that not only for spreadsheets, but overall, your points about, the visual aspect, the combination of AI and UI, I think will be kind of the way we'll go. And right now, AI is very text heavy and kind of it doesn't give you a lot of other tools to work with. But it's often a really good way to start explaining to the computer what the task that you're trying to achieve. But then once things have been set up, once you have a great place to start, and maybe you saved kind of 15 minutes or half an hour or an hour of working, just getting started, then tweaking things and changing them is often faster. Just going in there and changing the values and extending the ranges and so on, than it would be to kind of say in text or voice, can you please extend that range, another 10 cells or something like that. So I think that's one thing that stands out. The other thing kind of from our conversation that I'll take away is that AI has this kind of issue of looking like a black box. So you have to be able to look into what happened and verify the calculations. And, you may not do it every time, but you want to know that you are able to do so to see how the AI came to a conclusion. And that will require an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. And then thirdly, I don't think that we have convinced each other that spreadsheets in somewhat the same way as they have existed over the last almost 50 years will continue to exist into the future.
Yeah, that's a nice summary there. It's it'll be interesting and exciting to see how it all develops and shakes out.
Absolutely. So, Ben, thanks so much for the conversation. Always a pleasure. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll be sending out the recording in the next couple of days, and you can check that out and send that to your friends and interested ones. And again, have a great summer, everyone. See you back in one of these conversations in a couple of months' time.
Thank you very much, Hjalmar, and perhaps we can do a part 2 in 6 months or something.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.